Okay. So so yeah, I hope you guys all enjoy this. So this is Nick Taormina. He is the owner of Signature Home Inspections. He is one of my go-to inspectors. I've been through quite a few inspectors. Surprisingly enough, every inspector I used was recommended to me from another realtor, and they ended up doing something wrong at some point, and I had to move on from them. Nick was also recommended to me, and he's probably my favorite. He's not only very thorough, he's very honest. He goes over the best thing I love about it is when he's done with the inspection, he'll sit the clients, my buyers, in the living room and go over all of the major issues and answer questions for them and just be accessible real time, which I think is really cool. And yeah, he gives great recommendations and all of that. So I asked him, this would be a cool idea if you could go over, general issues that agents might run into and buyers too with during a home inspection. So I think he's got a list of 10 things, Nick. All right, yeah, cool. So it'll be 10 issues that are common to find in homes in New Jersey. I'm sure it's relevant in other states too, if you are from another state. And that's really it. So, Nick, you can take it away, buddy.
Right. Thanks, Joe. Good morning, everyone. As Joe said, I'm Nick Taormina, Signature Home Inspections, licensed home inspector. Been doing it for a very long time. Started out in Long Island in New York in the late 1990s, early 2000s, before it was even a licensed profession. Went to the commercial side for a while, came back to residential, and here we are today. So one of the first things that I like to tell agents, with home inspections, and it's good to relate to your clients, that you have, manage your expectations properly. You know, there's going to be things wrong with a house. There's things wrong with every house. Some are tragic, most are not, and mostly everything can be overcome. No house is perfect, as you guys are all painfully aware, and that's really where managing their expectations comes in and plays a vital role, really. Um, you know, uh, and I'll go over some of the limitations of what a home inspection is and what we can find. And I also go over that with the client, pre-inspection, post-inspection, months or years down the road when they call up and say, my 50-year-old furnace broke down. How could this be? That's all part of managing those expectations. But with that, I'll get into some of the most common problems, at least that I find. And if I'm finding them, most inspectors are finding them. Nothing super special about me. Don't have X-ray vision or anything like that. So on the exterior of the house, one of the most common problems we find are inadequate service, grading and draining. And it sounds petty when you bring it up. Oh, you have negative grading at your foundation walls. But water is the enemy of homes. Most foundation issues that manifest over time are directly related to hydrostatic pressure, water infiltration, wood rot, structure rot because of water. So, when we make the recommendations, extend your gutters out 5 feet, have a gradual slope away from your house. It's important. Sometimes, it's as easy as bringing in a couple of bags of dirt in the springtime to square that away. Um, but again, it's important. Roofing issues. So, roofing issues aren't as serious most times as people think. Even a roof leak. Just because you have a roof leak doesn't mean you need a new roof. It means you need the roof, wherever the leak is, to be repaired. With that, we are seeing a problem with roofs, especially with investors, flipper investors that really have no business doing what they're doing. We're seeing, shingle misalignment, defective installations, especially in valleys where two planes of the roof come together, kind of like that. We're seeing improper installation of a vent, chimney, and plumbing vent penetrations. And those are important to call out and to illustrate to the buyer and also to whoever's selling it. 90% of roof leaks happen at some sort of penetration. So if you start out with a new roof that the plumbing vents aren't flashed correctly, the chimney is not flashed correctly, those are really issues that need to be addressed. In fact, I found them, especially last summer, is really when I started identifying them, that I even called up a couple of roofing manufacturers. I thought somewhere down the line I didn't get the memo about flashing installation. And, it turns out that, I happen in this instance to be correct. They just weren't installing them correctly. We're also seeing a lot of Band-Aid patches, a lot of tar, a lot of Carnac, which is a roofing sealer, a lot of silicone. Those products serve a purpose, but the truth is, when you have a leaky plumbing vent and you go up there with a bucket of Carnac and put it all over it, it's akin to putting a Band-Aid on a cut you need 20 stitches on. So they're easy to fix, they're not expensive, but they're important. We're also seeing electrical problems, incorrect wiring. A lot, an old-time inspector once told me, he said, "You know what, Nick? Why don't we ever see any real plumbing issues?" And I said, "Well, why?" And he said, "Well, you need a torch. At least at the time, you need a torch. You need a torch. You need fittings. Nobody wants to flood their house." And he goes, "Why do we see so many electrical problems?" And the reason is this guy right here, this screwdriver, because that's all you need to open your panel, pull out an outlet, and get yourself into trouble. We're seeing a lot of incorrectly wired outlets, reverse polarity. And it's a simple fix, but it's indicative of an unprofessional job. And why is it important? If you look at a light bulb, the little nub at the bottom of the threads, that button sits on the hot terminal of the lamp. The screws sit on the neutral terminal. So if you invert those wires at the outlet you plug that light in and touch that, there's a chance for an electric shock. Again, so it's an easy fix, but it's a common defect we see and a defect that needs to be addressed. And it also speaks to the larger issue. A licensed electrician is not wiring an outlet backwards. So somebody along the line in that house, bought an outlet at Home Depot and went at it. Also, in the electrical panel, we're seeing a lot of what's called, you hear the word double tap. Double tap hot conductors. Certain panels allow that. Most panels do not. Square D actually allows it. We're seeing double tap neutrals on the neutral bus bar. That's not allowed by the electrical code under any circumstance. And why is it important? Two reasons. Number one, sometimes, not always, but you can't generate enough torque under a lug that's made for one wire. So neutral wires become loose, lights start flickering, loose wires generate heat, and the rest is fire department history. The other reason is if you need to isolate a circuit and you have two neutrals or a neutral and a ground under the lug, the electrician's not going to, he's going to think the circuit's isolated and he could take a shock, or the homeowner could take a shock. We're also seeing improper wiring, open junction boxes. Someone puts new hi-hats up in their living room and go into the attic, and the wires are just spliced together with electrical tape. All splices of wires need to be properly secured inside a closed junction box. And by the way, a junction box and a lid for it is about $350 at Home Depot. So it's an easy fix, but it's important. Not only that, but you walk into the attic, you step on an open splice wire. Again, you could take that shock. Federal Pacific panels, Zinco panels. We don't see as many. We still come across them probably twice a month or so. So Federal Pacific, as you're all aware of, I'm sure, has a high failure rate. And in fact, that failure rate is about 30%. But what is the failure we're talking about? The most common failure is that the circuit does not trip when overloaded. So you have a 15 amp circuit, put 30 amps on it, and the breaker just doesn't trip. It's a problem with Federal Pacific. They're out of business now. We always recommend an upgrade to Federal Pacific panels, and same thing with Zinco, which is made by Slovenia. Some homeowners insurance carriers, it's really more on the commercial side, but some homeowner insurance won't insure you with it. That's the bad news. The good news is, look, an upgrade is about $1,800. You get yourself a nice brand new 200 amp panel, and it's put to bed, and you don't have to worry about it. The Federal Pacific also has another flaw in it, that the way the breakers are put in, when it's in the on position, if you look at it, it says no. So some people think that no means there's no power when you're dealing with a live circuit. Missing GFCIs, improperly wired GFCIs, run into a lot of that. Sometimes in an older home, you have to be careful how you word it to the client. I did a house yesterday. Where was it? Elmwood Park. And it was built in the 60s. And you know what? The last nail the builder put in the wall when he left was all that was ever done to it. But it was in reasonably good condition. But the bathroom and kitchens had no GFCIs. So I'd like to make the recommendation, not as a repair or replace, but an FYI type of rec. Hey, look, you know what? The kitchens from 1960, there weren't even GFCIs invented at that time. For your safety, if you're not going to upgrade the kitchen, we'd like to see you install GFCIs here. They're not difficult to have an electrician install, and they're not all that expensive. So we are seeing a lot of that. There's a couple of new codes, that came down with GFCIs, unfinished basements, finished basements, laundry rooms, and HVAC systems. Actually, heating and air conditioners are now required to be GFCI protected. The jury's still out on that. A GFCI on an HVAC circuit tends to nuisance trip. So, it's in the electrical code. I'm not sure if Jersey is going to carve it out, and states have the ability to adopt what they want.
Hey Nick,
Yeah.
it's Joe. So what is a GFCI exactly? Like, what does it do? Just so in case
Yep.
somebody might not know, they could better explain it to their client.
Sure. So we've all seen GFCIs in kitchens and bathrooms, right? The little test and reset button. Stands for ground fault circuit interrupter. It's required, wet, damp locations, locations where people are more likely to take a shock. What happens is, the hot wire runs a current in, and the neutral, the white wire, brings it back to its source, which is, hopefully the transformer at the pole. But there's a microchip, so to speak, in there that's always sensing input voltage versus return voltage. And anytime there's a millivolt discrepancy in it, it shuts a circuit down. Because the theory is, where is that stray current going? And the answer is probably into you. So it turns it off in milliseconds, kills the power just to that outlet or to that circuit if the circuit is a GFCI protected circuit, or run in series with whatever outlets are down the line. Like I said, we've all seen them, and you'll find them most commonly in bathrooms, kitchens, required outdoor, required at swimming pools, and that sort of thing. Again, not a big deal. Well, I don't want to say it's not a big deal if you don't have them, but I guess from an inspection realtor standpoint, it's not a big deal. Look, they're $13 to $26 each. You don't have one in your bathroom, if you're comfortable putting it in an outlet, put it in. If you're not, hire an electrician. It'll probably charge you $100 or so. So moving on here. Any questions on electrical or GFCIs? Anyone have any questions about that? No? Okay. Heating system defects. So especially gas systems. Gas systems are very poorly maintained. Just like your kitchen stove, people crank up the thermostat, they have heat, everything's good. They need service like any other appliance in your house. Oil burners, oil's a much dirtier burn, so it's going to need more intense and more frequent service, at least once a year. Otherwise, the machine's going to let you know that it doesn't like it by providing no heat for you. We're seeing a lot of venting problems. There's a couple of categories of furnace. Category 1's a natural draft. Category 2 and 3 and 4, they're sealed, pressurized mechanical draft systems. Normally, you're going to see a category 1, which is just an atmospheric, or a category 4 that vents with PVC. Once in a while, you'll see a 2 or 3. With the category 1, which is a natural draft, right, metal pipe, vent connector pipe, we're seeing improper pitch. You have to pitch. The pipes have to be pitched 1/4 inch per foot of run. To have that draft. We're seeing a lot of improper combustible clearance. So a single wall pipe, which is just one wall, 26 gauge galvanized steel, requires a minimum, and these are minimums, 6 inches to combustible clearance. That means the floor joists, the paneling, the drywall. Now people say, well, drywall is not combustible. Well, drywall is combustible. The paper, it's lined with paper on the front and back, so the paper is combustible. B vent, which is a double wall vent, requires 1 inch. And sometimes when we see a single wall pipe with improper combustible clearance, the fix is just to change the pipe to a B vent. If you have 3 inches of clearance, you know what? It's no good for a single wall pipe, but for a B vent, it's plenty of room. We're seeing improper venting configurations. You have common or co-venting of flue gases into a common flue in the chimney. We're seeing, 120,000 BTU furnace venting above a 40,000 BTU water heater. It's got to be the other way around. The lower BTU, the smaller appliance, which is usually a water heater, has to vent above it. Otherwise, if the furnace is on and the water heater goes on, the velocity of the draft of the higher unit is going to cause the exhaust of the water heater to backdraft.
Hey Nick, what's exhausting out of the water heater in the furnace?
Products of combustion. Anytime you burn any type of carbon-based fuel, whether it's wood, whether it's gas, whether it's oil, whether it's propane, you're getting some byproducts. You're getting carbon dioxide, you're getting carbon monoxide, you're getting some corrosive materials, and that all has to vent out, and it vents out on category 1 by natural draft. Just a differential in temperature, that hot gas lofts up, and there's something called the Venturi effect that causes a high chimney to draw up. Chimneys, we're finding that they're unlined. You have an old brick chimney and you look down and all you see is brick. That's improper venting. The Bible for venting is National Fire Protection Association Standard 211. And the first sentence in venting says, all chimneys must be lined, and that could be a terracotta flue liner. It could be a double wall stainless steel, flexible or rigid pipe. And it could be an aluminum pipe if you're venting low temperature exhaust, like just a water heater.
It's funny, when I got into real estate, there was one thing I never realized, that houses had chimneys but no fireplaces, and I was always like, what does that mean? And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, that's where everything actually vents out. And it's funny because I think some people do have that misconception. They say, oh, where's the fireplace in this house? I see the brick on top of the roof, but really that's where all these harmful carbon monoxide, dioxide is coming out and is venting out of the house. And I've ran into situations where even just on a buy side went into someone's basement and saw that they didn't even have the ductwork going into the chimney to exit out. So their water heater was just dumping carbon monoxide in their basement. They had no idea, and I let them know. So that's something really good as realtors to pay attention to and notice that the penetrations are sealed correctly and the ductwork actually exists.
Right. It's a great point, Joe. The things people do to their homes sometimes defies logic. I mean, you don't have to be, you don't even, just common sense tells you if this thing is, blowing hot exhaust out at you, the place for it isn't within the building envelope. And I think most people, if they just think about it for a second, would realize that. Another problem we're seeing is co-venting with a fireplace. So you have a fireplace, one flue, now they want to add a water heater, and they use the same flue. So you can have a common chimney, which is the brick, but the flue, which is the liner inside, you cannot vent a wood burning appliance with a gas burning appliance. You can vent a gas burner with an oil appliance, but you can't. The wood has to have its own flue from appliance to the exterior of the house. We're finding that a lot. I'm finding when people they add wood stoves to their basement for extra heat, and they just blast a hole right through the chimney and put it into the same flue as the heating appliances. That's actually not allowed by the Fire Protection Association standards. So they'll need to square that away. You're going to need a chimney person in there to run a new flue, liner. So it's not a difficult job, but it could be expensive. Just a gas liner, it's $1,500+. A chimney for a fireplace, double wall stainless steel, they get expensive. They cost me $4,000. So yeah,
I think I learned that from you too, because some people you'll have buyers go into a house and they see a wood burning fireplace and they don't want wood burning, they want gas. And I think I learned this from you recently in that house in Verona that you have to actually change the whole flue system too. So that's something you have to tell your buyers, that you can't just put a gas line in there and keep the chimney the same, right?
yeah. So in certain instances you can, as long as the chimney liner is not too big, it's sized properly for the BTUs of the appliance, if it's insulated. But I'll tell you, the truth of the matter is this, guys. Every chimney I shove a camera up has a cracked flue. It's just the way it is. Once that happens, I have to recommend a reliner, and that's under fireplaces and chimney inspections, which I guess maybe is for another webinar. But just prepare when you see someone come to do that level 2. You're going to have a rock in your shoe, guaranteed, because there's always a problem. I mean, really, it's just unbelievable. There really is always a problem.
I'm sorry. I have a question. I'm sorry, Christy. This is Christy Chapman. Nice to meet you, Nick. Thanks for taking the time. I just want to make sure I understand. Are you talking about like if someone wanted to convert to gas fireplace, it's going to be about up in the thousands for that conversion? Did I miss that part?
No. So actually, you didn't really touch on that, but you hit it right on the head. So National Fire Protection Association Standard 211 states that a level 2 chimney inspection, which really always involves a camera. You can't do level 2 without running a camera up the flue. Anytime you have a bunch of different scenarios, chimney fires, well, one of those requirements is change in fuel source. So if you have a wood burning fireplace and you want to put a gas log insert in there, you're required to have a level 2 inspection. Whether you do or not, it's completely up to you. But you're required to have one. Again, then it goes back to what I previously said, that once you put that camera up there, there's always an issue. But another issue is, there's calculations that are done. The flue tile size, square inches versus firebox square inches versus BTUs. Can the flue handle the BTUs of the gas? And the answer is probably yes if you're converting to gas. But then the next question is the flue too big? Because if the flue is too big, the gas, the vent, the exhaust from the gas will cool and condense prior to exiting the chimney, and it condensate from combustion of natural gas is very corrosive. So not only will you have water dripping down into the firebox, but it'll deteriorate if it's a clay flue liner, if it's even if it's a stainless steel liner, it'll corrode it. So you have to size the flue to the BTUs of the appliance, or in the case of a wood burner, to the overall size of the opening of the firebox. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
No problem. So going on with common, home inspection problems, poor overall maintenance. What can I say about it? People just don't take care of their houses sometimes as much as they should. Windows don't work. They don't open. Glass is broken. Windows are nailed shut, painted shut. Plumbing pipes are corroded and leaking. bottom of the cabinets are rotted.
Mm.
So just
I'm
overall
thinking
maintenance.
gutters are like the big one for me. Every time I
Yeah,
see gutters not taken care of, it's like the worst possible thing for your house to not
yeah,
have gutters drained properly or be cleaned. I always point that out to clients, sellers, buyers all the time.
yeah. Gutters are important, and it's obviously it depends on your roof pitch, your roof slope, how high your roof is. If you're in one of these McMansions, I always recommend you have a gutter cleaning company come out. I don't want to tell you to get up on a ladder and have you fall and break your neck. But if you have, a ranch, a bi-level, even a cape where you could put a ladder up to it and clean it, and if you have that ability, it's a great time, once or twice a year to kind of get up there. Take a look at your roof, take a look at your plumbing vents, get intimate with your roof, right? Nothing beats being up on a ladder. And the perfect opportunity to kill two birds with one stone is, keeping your gutters clean. Structural problems. They're not as big a deal as everybody thinks. Structural defects in houses, we find them. A lot of the ones I find are related to not the foundation structure, but rather the framing structure, and it's usually caused by someone doing work on the house. And I always joke, who's the most dangerous guy on a job site? A plumber with a sawzall, right? Because he doesn't, or she doesn't care. They have to run their drain pipe, and if they have to cut, a 5-inch notch through a 10-inch girder, they're going to do it. And you know what? You're going to end up with a structural problem. You're going to have sagging floors. You're going to, doors aren't going to open. So, there's a formula, for notching and boring, where you can put a hole, where you can put a notch, how big it could be. It's usually 1/6 of the depth of the joist. But other trades don't, they know about it, but again, they have to run their plumbing, their wiring, and they just don't care. We see this a lot in the newer houses, with engineered trusses, engineered eye joists. Those eye joists on floor, in the floor. You have a top cord, you have the web, which looks like particle board, and you have bottom cord. All plumbing, wiring, whatever you want to put, has to go through that center part. The second you put a notch hole in that top or bottom cord, the only fix that's acceptable is one made by a structural engineer. So, you look at a house and an electrician puts a 1-inch hole in the top cord. Well, now you're in for a $700 design repair. So it's real important, that these other trades, when they come in, they're attentive and cognizant of what they're doing. It's not always the case. Foundation issues, we find them, they're out there, that's for sure. Cracking, minor cracking in, poured concrete walls. Usually we find them in the concrete or the cinder block, masonry walls. And it's usually caused by water, hydrostatic pressure, whether it's washing away and undermining the footing, then you end up with a stair crack. Stair cracks are always need to be repaired. And there's a proper repair. Just filling it with hydrostatic cement, doesn't really do the trick. I'm sorry, hydraulic cement doesn't really do the trick. Stair cracks are indicative of settlements and differential settlement. One side settled and the other side stayed put, and you end up with that stair crack. The more severe the stair crack, the bigger your problem. Right? It just makes sense. If the top of the stair crack is 1 inch wide and the bottom is a centimeter, you have a sinking problem on your hand, and that needs to be repaired. There's a million repairs for it. Not all expensive. Some could be expensive. Concrete, same thing with poured concrete. If you have a crack and it looks like a V, that's differential settlement. So your foundation wall is tipping. But by far, the kiss of death, for a house is a cinder block wall that's out of plumb, which means it's bowed and has a nice gigantic crack running horizontally through it. Something's pushing that wall, and that's a huge problem. Those aren't as common as you think, but I found one yesterday. But everything could be fixed, guys. Some people freak out immediately. Oh my God, it's going to cost something. it may not always cost $100,000. Sometimes it costs $4,000. They can carbon strap the wall, put in French drains. So I always tell my clients, listen, if you really love the house and this is the house for you, at least look into what it takes to repair it. No sense in throwing a match in the house and running for your life. You've gone this far, you might as well take a look. But again, these issues are almost always caused by water. They could be caused by expansive soil and soil consolidation and that sort of thing. But normally it's, caused by water. Other problems we see is efflorescence in basements. Now, most basements have efflorescence, that little white powder. If the walls are grown with it, it's a problem. If it's just at the bottom, I always tell clients to monitor it. And the reason I say that is because, listen, essentially we're in a big hole in the ground surrounded by wet dirt. Of course, there's going to be some water vapor intrusion. It's kind of just, how can there not be? But if there's tons of it, then you go back to the first thing I talked about, grading. Some French drains, maybe put a swale, which is a landscape design feature, next to that wall so it could channel water away. If you dry up that soil, that efflorescence will probably go away. Incidentally, it's not mold. People are like, oh my God, it's all white and fuzzy. It's mold, and it's not. What happens is as the water transverses the masonry, it's picking up the salts, and the minerals within the wall. And then as it comes to the inside of the house, it surface evaporates. Like when you go running and you're all sweaty, but you don't take a shower because you're in a hurry and you're all gritty. Your head's gritty, your neck's gritty. That's just the salt in your sweat evaporating on your skin. Really no different from the efflorescence. But again, if you have tons of it, it needs to be addressed. How's it addressed? Usually with a French drain system.
That's a good explanation of it. Nick, one common, I know we're getting about 40 minutes in, but
really?
Yeah. One common question I always get from buyers since we're talking about structural is that whenever they see cracks in sheetrock, usually it's by a door frame or something. What's an indication if that's good, if that's bad, and why does that happen?
So cracks within the sheetrock. So by far, in my opinion, the worst crack you can have in a sheetrock is a vertical crack that transverses the ceiling wall junction. Those are usually indicative of something structural going on, and it could be something simple, like maybe they didn't put a header where they should have had a header, or maybe the header's undersized. Diagonal cracks at doors are common, but if this thing looks like it was hit with a sledgehammer and that's how big the crack is, that's also a problem. But remember, structural problems don't happen in a vacuum. One crack in a door, one small crack in a foundation isn't really, indicative of a true structural problem. Now if you have cracks in the foundation, diagonal cracks at the door, hey, the window next to this crack in the foundation is not opening, the doors swing open by themselves. Then you start to, it's a story. You start to build a story, and you put all this stuff together, and then you recommend a structural engineer. But there are cases where, one thing can trigger that same recommendation. But usually you want, again, a crack in the foundation wall. It's not like, oh my God, you have foundation issues. Call a structural engineer. What else is going on with that house? Now, not to knock people, but I've always been the type of person where I make a decision. Listen, good or bad, it's a decision. If it's a bad decision, well, I have $2 million in professional liability, right? So what am I, sometimes you make bad calls, but you don't want to just keep recommending people. Recommend an HVAC contractor, recommend a structural engineer, recommend a roofer, recommend a plumber. And what the hell did you hire me for it, right? If you're constantly making recommendations. So, listen, you want to be a little bit of a detective, right? You want to put on your detective hat and, put a story together. Sometimes it's nothing. Sometimes it's more than nothing.
Hey, Nick.
Yes.
Hi, how are you? It's Gina Levy.
Hey, Gina.
Thank you for doing this. This is wonderful. I have a question. I had a situation yesterday, an inspection. There were several cracks in beams in the basement and the attic. So how risky are those? And at what point do you know if that could potentially be a structural thing. I mean, would structural issue only be right in the foundation, or
No,
the
you can have
sheetrock?
you can have a framing structural issue. So it depends. The answer is really it depends what they look like. So wood dries out and cracks. That's called checking. That's different than a crack. If you have for example, a split roof rafter that it's the whole thing's completely separated, then that falls under the definition of a structural issue. But this is where the term can scare the hell out of people. You have two cracked rafters, and it goes under the structural section. At least in my report, it does. But what's the fix? The fix is, let's say it's a 2x6 rafter and it's cracked straight through the middle. So you buy two 2x6 rafters. You put construction adhesive on it. You glue it on either side of that crack, 3 feet above it, 3 feet below it. You screw it, glue it, and then carriage bolt it. And that's your repair.
Is that sistering? Is that the same thing as sistering?
That is sistering, exactly right.
Okay.
So,
okay.
Sometimes, like even when I was talking about like the plumber going through your beam, cases like that fall under structure, but I don't recommend a structural engineer for that. Structural engineers get to the root cause of a problem. Well, if you have a 5-inch hole in a 6-inch rafter, we already know what the root cause is, right? General contractor, just fix that thing up. Okay. But again, remember, wood dries out and it's called checking. So, depends on the severity of it. I mean, there could be a severe case of checking where you need to sister up, but, if they're just minor cracks, superficial, then that's nothing. Then that wouldn't even make my report. But again, it goes, back to making a decision. Listen, either it's something or it's nothing. It can't be, I don't know. Have somebody else look at it. I'm not a fan of that. So while we're up in the attic, so we do find a lot of ventilation issues in the attic. Attics need proper ventilation. They're unconditioned space unless they're insulated on the rafters, then the conditioned space. But most attics have insulation on the floor. And the reason is because the attic is unconditioned. So you want to isolate that unconditioned space from the building envelope. And the way that's done is with insulation on the floor. Attics need approximately 1 square foot of ventilation divided equally between lower venting, soffit vents, and upper venting, ridge vents, gable vents, passive vents, whatever you have up there, for every 300 square feet of attic space. People go up into their attics and they look towards the rafters, right, towards the bottom slope, and they see daylight. And like, daylight, let me stuff insulation in here. That's no good. It's the worst thing you could do, and people do all the time. You need that lower venting to get that proper ventilation up to the ridge to ventilate that attic. If that does not happen, conditioned air from the living space, I don't care how good it's insulated or how well it's insulated, it's going to make it up there. So on a really cold winter day, it's 10 degrees outside, that hot air from your living space is making it into the attic. It's hitting that cold roof. It's not being ventilated, and it's turning into a snow cone instantaneously, right? You ever go up to your attic on a cold winter morning and you see ice on the sheathing of your roof? You have a ventilation problem. Then the sun comes out and it melts it. You see all little drip marks on the floor. What happens over time is the roof sheathing turns black. First thing people say to me, oh my God, it's all black mold. It's not black mold. It's tannin staining. As wood constantly is exposed to chronic moisture, the tannins in the wood leach out and stain it dark, either brown or black. But it's still an issue. The sheathing will go, it'll start to wave, it'll buckle, it'll delaminate. The roofing shingle itself will start to deteriorate. The rafters will start to spread and sag. And then you end up with a structural issue that's expensive. In the order of $10,000+ because they have to reframe or resister up every rafter. Otherwise, you end up with a sag. You ever see a house with a sagging roof line? It's caused by a couple of issues, but one of them is inadequate or improper ventilation. The other issue we're finding with ventilation is we're seeing multiple forms of either lower or upper ventilation. You can only have one. So you have that soffit vent venting up right through convection out the ridge. And then somebody says, I want to put a power vent right next to the ridge. So instead of that air going this way, it goes from the power vent to the ridge, or from the ridge to the power vent. It's called short circuiting. So, you're only really supposed to have one form of upper and one form of lower ventilation. When we're finding a lot of people are throwing power fans, in their attic, to cool it off. There's something else going on there. That's why you need that fan. And what you've done is you've actually made the problem worse. Insulation. We see the number one insulation problem I see, besides lack of insulation, I suppose, is improper orientation of the vapor barrier. So if you look at it, we've all seen standard pieces of fiberglass insulation, right? Big vat of cotton candy, and there's paper on it, or foil, whatever you decide to have. That's the vapor barrier. Now, as people are installing this happens in crawl spaces literally all the time. That vapor barrier needs to face the warm side of the crawl space, which is the floor, right? As you're installing this incorrectly, printed all over this paper is this side faces the living space. It's unbelievable, but it's all installed upside down. What happens? Moisture gets caught in that vapor barrier and it starts to rot the subfloor. So that's actually one of the number one defects we find, really, period, but in insulation. And it always makes me laugh because I always mark it as a defect and then take a picture of the paper that says this side towards the warm part of the house. Moving on. The other problem, I'm not going to talk in depth about fireplaces and sewer scopes, but I'd like to touch on them real quick. A sewer lateral inspection. We're in northern New Jersey. I recommend sewer lateral inspections, which is just a pipe underground from the house to the sewer drop in the street. Two houses really, in my opinion, qualify for them. Older houses, right? 50s, 60s, 70s. And then the shocker is the brand new house. Why the brand new house? It's PVC pipe. What should be wrong with it? When they're grading and backfilling, especially on a Friday afternoon, they're in a rush and they crush the pipe. Can't tell you how many brand new houses have separated and crushed pipes because of aggressive backfill. And that's the time to catch it because the soil's soft. They can dig down there and repair it. Older houses, it's self-explanatory, right? You have an old cast iron or clay pipe and there's all kinds of problems with it. I had an incident, which is, I guess with a sewer inspection a few years back, and it's important, not only for me, but it's really important for you guys. Always recommend one, and I don't care if you hire a plumber. I'm not trying to steer sewer scopes my way. This is why I had a house in Teaneck, and it was a flip. It was a dog. It had foundation issues. They pretended the air conditioner was installed and it wasn't. But I said, listen, why don't we throw this camera down, down the sewer line? I think it's probably a good idea. You have workers in here, they flush paint, they flush all kinds of stuff. So they said, well, how much is it? I said, well, it's usually $300, but I'm standing here with the camera, so $200 will knock this thing out of the way. All right, can we let you know? I said, yep, I'll come back in 5 days to pick up that radon anyway. Well, we're going to kind of hold off. No problem. So my report, the first line says, you are strongly encouraged to have a sewer lateral inspection for A, B, and C reasons. 3 months later, Nick, my sink in the basement's backing up. So I said, call Roto-Rooter, right? You probably have a clog. Roto-Rooter comes, put the camera down, the whole thing's collapsed. 20 feet down the line in the driveway. $18,000. So he said, well, you didn't explain it to us enough. I said, no, I explained it to you enough. And here's the report that you signed acknowledging it. So they couldn't do anything with me. So who did they go to next? Their realtor. You didn't explain enough to me. Someone should pay for this. So he called me. I said, refer them to the first line in my report. And everything was good on our end. But you know what? As you're probably aware, when people have nowhere to go, they go after the people with insurance. And that's us. So keep that in mind. recommended to them, it just made me laugh that they told the realtor, well, you didn't explain it enough to us. Well, you need a sewer inspection. I mean, I don't know how much further to explain it, right? But they were looking for someone to pay. And, luckily that someone wasn't me or the agent. Same thing, fireplaces. Fireplaces have all kinds of problems. I try to explain to clients that when they have a level 2, they're going to look like a deer in the headlights when it's over. And there's a reason for that. That same code or standard I was referring to before, NFPA 211, has a line in it that's, in my opinion, unfair, but probably written. It was written because something happened. It says no part of the chimney, flue, firebox, or venting system shall be grandfathered. So that's why level 2 and chimneys are, sometimes carved out of the contract, but always a problem because we have to inspect. Unlike those GFCIs I was talking about, where it's a kitchen from the 60s, they're not there, but I want it. Yeah, I'd like to see you get them for your own safety. When I inspect a chimney and a fireplace, I have to inspect it like it was installed yesterday. Kind of unfair, but that's the standard. That's what it says in the standard, which is why, again, there's always a problem.
Gina, did somebody have a question? I thought I saw somebody unmute.
I did. It's Gina. Do you recommend the sewer scopes for townhomes as well? Because I've done them for townhomes, and people, the other realtor sometimes acts like I'm crazy.
Yeah. I don't, Gina. Well, if it's a PUD, I recommend it because they own everything. If it's a townhouse with an association that bears responsibility for the exterior components, including the lateral, then it's just a colossal waste of the client's money because their responsibility for the sewer line ends the second I poke out the foundation wall. So, I mean, I sometimes.
Well,
go ahead.
Oh, I'm talking about the sewer scope. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
because some of the the HOAs, they're only responsible for like the first 5 feet of the sewer, or just the 5 feet that goes to the outside. So I don't know. I mean, I still recommended it.
Yeah. So
because I guess there still could potentially be a problem. But
yeah, listen, you're not wrong, Gina. The truth is, if the association absolves themselves from liability 5 feet out the foundation wall, and now you have from that 5 feet, you have a 30-foot run to the middle of the street where the sewer drop is. And if that homeowner is responsible for that lateral, yeah, you should absolutely recommend it.
right.
But if the HOA is responsible, from the foundation to the sewer drop, I wouldn't recommend it because they have the homeowner has no liability for it.
Right. So that's a good question to ask, obviously.
Yeah. Yes. Some of these associations are funny, as you guys are all well aware. I mean, the things they cover, the things they won't cover. And that's that sort of thing. But once in a while, as we all know, you get a client that just insists on it. I tried to talk a guy out of a sewer scope and a tank sweep in a condo, and he was adamant about it. So I said, listen, it's your money. I mean, I'm just telling you, it's a huge waste of money. As I'm leaving, it was a condo up on the Pennsylvania border, actually, so it had a community septic system. As I'm leaving, there's a septic guy there shaking his head. He goes, this guy wants the septic inspected. So some people just want what they want. But again, if the client bears no responsibility for the component, I would just put it to them. You're not responsible. I'm not telling you. I guess cover all base. I'm not telling you not to get one, but I think it's a waste of your money because even if it's broken, it wouldn't be you paying for it.
Yeah, I never try to. Yeah, in those situations, if they're not liable, I agree with that. But I had a situation which might help somebody where the homeowner said they got rid of their oil tank themselves. So the buyer was going to be like, oh, well, then I guess I don't really need to do a tank sweep. But the inspector came in and saw evidence that there might be another tank somewhere. So I was like, it's worth doing it. I mean, you just don't know. Sure enough, found 1,000-gallon tank outside the foundation. So the guy wasn't lying. He did take out the interior tank in the basement, but there was an additional tank that she would have never known was there and would have been responsible for when she ended up selling. So even when a homeowner's like, yeah, I took it out, just do it anyway. That is one, especially in an older home, it's well worth doing.
Yeah, yeah, it's a great point. So I do also perform tank scans. I use a field locator and a ground penetrating radar. My record is 5. I found 5 tanks on a house in Caldwell. It was a big house and it had a carriage house in the back, so it wasn't like it was a tiny house. But you're exactly right, and don't forget that people are lying. They lie to you. Listen, I did one for an agent in West Orange. He was actually selling it, and the guy, I don't even know how it happened. In the 80s, says he abandoned a tank, filled it with sand, and the town gave him a CO. So the reason I was there is because they just wanted to know where it was so they can have it removed. So I find it in the driveway. Tank remediation removal guys come. It's got 300 gallons of oil in it. It's leaking. They dig up the dirt and there's bedrock. And apparently when you hit bedrock, now you got a core drill 30 feet down. It was a fortune to get rid of. The other thing I wrote on the tank is, oh yeah, we got rid of the tank, But they didn't really, they just abandoned it in place or decommissioned it. And that doesn't really qualify as getting rid of the tank, right? I mean, there may be no leaks and anything like that, and maybe an easy removal. But they didn't really get rid of the tank. So they, and some people try to mislead you. Some people just misunderstand what they're saying. All right, any questions for me? Any other questions?
No, it's good stuff, man.
Right.
So
Very
we are about an hour in. Do you have a couple more things you wanna? I don't know how much time everybody has. If you want to hang out for another 10, 15 minutes, or you want to wrap it up.
I think I went over everything I think I needed to go over. Any other questions, guys? I do sewer scopes, tank scans, air quality testing, fireplace inspections, thermal imaging. What else do I do there? I think that's it.
Yeah. Next.
Oh, and radon.
I love when I get a client and they say, we're going to go with your inspector, Nick. And I'm just like, all right. I'm like, because I know there's a lot of peace of mind involved because I know he's not going to do them wrong. So.
Yeah. You know what, it sounds a little cliche, but, what you do matters, right? When you inspect, whether you sell, it matters. Listen, I know it becomes routine sometimes, but you're selling people a home, you're inspecting someone's home. If that doesn't matter to you, then maybe do something else. When it stops mattering. Especially on my end, if I do a chimney inspection, and I tell you your chimney, it needs to be repaired. It needs to be repaired. I'm not trying to make. And by the way, I don't repair anything I fix. Either with the sewer or with the chimney. I am a certified, chimney contractor, but once I inspect your chimney, I don't care what's wrong with it. I'll never repair it. Never, ever, ever. It's, it's in my opinion, it's not ethical. I lose a ton of money on it, that's for sure. But I just rather inspect. But again, I'm telling you, your fireplace is good to use. Listen, I'm telling you, you have a fire inside your house, right? That's got to matter, guys. Any radon questions? I know I got a lot of radon questions. No? I'll give you a radon spiel. How's that, Joe? You got time for that? All right, so radon. We all know what radon is, right? But I'll go over it. It's the final decay prodigy of uranium. Over millions of years, as uranium decays, it turns into lead, polonium, palladium. And then we have radon, right? I use a continuous radon monitor. I normally use a continuous radon monitor, but if I'm inspecting an abandoned house in Irvington, they get a charcoal canister because the monitors are $1,000 each. So someone's got to be there to make sure they don't go anywhere. Radon, it's the second leading cause of lung cancer in the United States, but it is a product of chronic exposure. Just like if you smoke one cigarette, you're probably not getting lung cancer. But easily treatable. I tell my clients, I don't care if you have the highest radon in the state of New Jersey. The subsod depressurization system that only costs about $2,000 completely takes care of the problem. I did a house in Montville. It had 57 picocuries. And remember, the cutoff's 4, right? 57 picocuries, the radiation dose exposure equivalent of 2,000 chest X-rays a year. That's what they were living with there. I think it was RA data put in 2 systems. It brought it down to 0.7, which is the ambient outdoor reading. So, want to talk to your clients about radons. I always give the spiel. I don't care if you have the highest radon in New Jersey. The system takes care of it. And even more importantly, radon changes over time, right? We're doing a short-term test, 2 to 6 days. It could be low for that 2 to 6 days because there's a myriad of factors that influence the concentration that comes up through the slab. So what about 6 months from now? It could be really high. So you get that system in, it's like a little security guard. It's always venting. It's always taking care of you. It's always venting any high or low radon. So, when people freak out over a house with a radon system, I always, try to comfort them. Listen, that's the best thing you can have here. It's like an alarm system, right? It's always protecting you. So no reason to have anybody freak out over a high radon or a house with a radon system installed. In fact, again, I think this installed system in a house is a win. You have something that's there for you.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really good info too. I didn't even really think about that to encourage people that that's a good idea, or it's better for you that the radon's already here, because you never know the fluctuation. I didn't even really think of that about that. So, yeah, that's really good, man. Nick, I really appreciate you taking the time today to do this. Hopefully, we'll do some more in the future. And thanks everyone for coming by. Like I said, if you don't mind, if you could email me, joecharlesnj@gmail, just for a little feedback of what you thought. Anything we could touch base on a little more for next time that you might want to hear about, or anything, any info you could give me. And if you want, I'll add you to the next classes we end up doing. So other than that, if you need Nick's info too, I could send it to you if you want to use Nick as a recommended inspector for any of your clients, like I do. Like I said, Nick's I think Nick's awesome. So I love it whenever a client chooses him. And yeah, that's really it. So thanks everyone so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Hey, Joe,
Thanks,
can we get
guys.
Nick's information in the chat?
Yeah,
Mind putting, that would be great.
yeah, most definitely. I'll let's see, did he leave already?
No, I'm here.
Oh, yeah, Nick, let's see. What's your
I'll type it into this chat.
okay, cool.
Thanks, Nick.
Just make sure I get it right.
I hope you do.
Yeah, you know what? I am an improficient typer. I mean, I can type like 60 words a minute with 2 fingers, but I usually smash.
Are you one of those jabbers where your finger just kind of hovers over the keyboard?
Yeah,
As if the letters have changed positions.
Exactly. All right, guys. Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. Thank you,
Thanks,
Nick.
Nick. Much
Thank you for your
appreciated.
time.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Joe.
it.
Thank you, Nick.
All right, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.